Let's think about how we can use our sun path diagrams to begin designing our homes for passive solar heat, to think about the solar orientation with our homes. And speaking of solar orientation, I don't know if you've seen this photograph. It's a famous photograph of camels in the desert of western Oman. If you study this photograph for a while, you will notice that these black shapes are shadows, and the camels are these thin white shapes seen directly from above. Wonderful illustration of sun angle. Well, when you're designing a house, you want to orient the house so it will take advantage of where the sun is coming in. And as we've discussed before, you want sun coming in the winter time when it's cold. You want to block the sun with some kind of shading when it's hot. And you also want to take advantage of cooling breezes and block the cold breezes. This picture at the bottom of this slide happens to be in Eugene, Oregon, and it is the first LEED Platinum residence in the United States. And it's right here in Eugene. It was designed by Arbor South. When you are designing your home, as Arbor South did for that home, you think about where is your window, where is your roof overhang or other shading device, and you make diagrams of where the sun comes in past the overhang, in through the window. And you can see whether the sun is blocked, whether it gets in, and how far back it gets. When you're thinking about orienting your building, think about the sun angle and how in the northern hemisphere the sun comes in from the south. So if you want to heat with passive solar, you want your house having the long direction running east-west so that the south side can get hit with sun. A narrow house running north-south is not so good. You want to put the biggest windows on the south where the sun can get in, and then smaller windows, especially on the west where the hot afternoon sun bakes in. Here's another diagram of sun coming in past an overhang, and you notice that one of the things you want to think about is thermal mass, the concrete or stone that stores heat and radiates it back out. A house that's heated with passive solar is going to look different on each side. It'll have big windows on the south, smaller windows on the east, really smaller windows on the west, and then on the north, sun doesn't get in, so that could be anything. Here's an example that's kind of interesting. This is a visitor center on the Blue Ridge Parkway. I don't know if you can guess which side is the south side. It's this side here with these sawtooth walls. There are some overhangs to block the sun in the summer, but in the winter the sun can get through there. This end on the right is the east end. It's going to let warm sun come in the early morning, but then over on the west end, which we see on the left, not many windows, some solid walls, and what windows there are protected by big, long overhangs. When you think about where to lay out streets, you want to think about solar orientation as well. So you want houses that are long, running east to west, and that allow solar access for everybody. You want to think about having thermal mass in your building that will store heat and radiate it back out when it's cold. It will also store heat and keep you cooler in the wintertime. And there are some noteworthy examples throughout history. Here's one right here in Oregon. I don't know if you've ever been to the Natural History Museum at the University of Oregon. If you haven't, I hope you go there. They have sandals from Fort Rock Cave that are over 9,000 years old. They're almost 10,000 years old. An archaeologist at the university, Luther Cressman, was investigating around Fort Rock in the 1930s, and in this cave, here in the upper right is a photograph of the cave opening, he was shocked to find these dried tule rush sandals. The climate there is so hot and dry that they didn't rot, they just stayed there in that cave. At the time they were made, 10,000 years ago, Fort Rock was surrounded by a lake, and along the edges of Fort Rock you can actually see wave marks where the water used to lap up. People who lived there would go out in boats and harvest these rushes and weave them into shoes. Anyway, so this cave has a big overhang. It's got thermal mass. In the summertime, the sun is high overhead and it's shady inside. In the wintertime, the sun angle is low and the sun comes in and warms the back of the cave. And then you've got thermal mass radiating the heat. Here's another example in Mesa, Verde in Colorado that you may have heard of. Here on the left is what it looks like from a distance. So these buildings were built of thermal mass material, and they're tucked back under this big stone overhang. You can see on the right the shade that's provided during the middle of the day. So this is just perfect for a desert climate. In the wintertime, the sun is low in the sky and it will get in under this ledge and warm these buildings, and then the thermal mass will store the heat. In the summertime, the sun is high overhead, and so those stone ledges shade the buildings and they stay cool. An architect in Croatia, which is in Eastern Europe, designed a house on those same principles. So here are some section views that he drew comparing a cave and houses. Here's a view of his outside space. And then here is a view, or some photos, views of how he arranged this building, facing the right direction, using overhangs judiciously, using thermal mass. And he also designed this house so that it blends into the landscape and looks like part of the stone that's already there. Here again are the same sources you saw last time that you may want to use to look up some of this cool stuff.